you're back.
Ciao, Bella. I am back. Oh my gosh. 2 weeks away, and you held down the fort beautifully on the podcast. Hello to everybody. It is amazing to be back. It was equally amazing to be gone.
Well, since you got back just last night, I haven't heard the whole download about your trip. So I'm really excited that I get to hear all about it along with our listeners.
Well, yeah. So for everyone tuning in, I spent the last 2 weeks in Italy, and I capped off the trip with a quick 2-night stay in Copenhagen in Denmark. The original goal of the trip was to go see my mother's youngest sister. I have an aunt who's only 6 years older than me, and she married an Italian years ago when she was young, had been an exchange student in Rome, fell in love. They got married. They lived in the States for a few years, and then he got homesick. So they moved to Italy. And since then, she's had 2 kids, and they're the ages of my kids, even though they're my first cousins. Last summer, we were all in Italy, like a big family reunion for my cousin Stefano's wedding. But this year, after my mom died, I just had this craving to see my aunt. I hardly got to spend time with her because of the way the wedding was. And then her husband is sick with Parkinson's, so she could not make the memorial service. So I told her, I will come to you and we will spend time together, remembering my mother and just being family. And she was able to procure an apartment for me that was literally next door to hers for $25 a night. So I was like, well, in that case, I'm going for 2 weeks. I was originally going to do like 4 days. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, no, I'm staying. So that was the design of the trip, actually.
And so when you went last summer, was that your first time in Italy or had you been there before?
Oh, no, I've been many times. And I've been to this town many times. Like, it's not a new town to me. It's right on the Mediterranean. It's about 30 minutes from Pisa. It's a little beach community that Italians go to for vacation. So you don't really run into Europeans as much. It's mostly Italians. Very cute beach community. You can see the mountains right behind and then the Mediterranean Sea right there. And there's this lovely long boardwalk with shops and restaurants. And yeah, I was walking like 17,000 steps a day, which is just crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. But the thing about it, and what made this trip kind of special, but also very familiar, is I tend to like to travel to places where I know someone who lives there. I enjoy actually being in a country long enough to establish a routine. So I'm not as big a fan of just 2 nights, although I did that in Copenhagen. We can talk about that in a minute. But I kind of like to get the feel for like walking a neighborhood and shopping in a local shop. And if somebody I know lives there, that's even better because then you sort of have this special key that gives you a window into what life in that country is all about.
Right.
And that definitely happened while I was there.
It sounds so wonderful. I loved you wrote me at one point on your trip that you were appreciating the tactile values of Giotto, which is a quote from our mutual favorite book.
Yes, A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. So interestingly, we took our entire family to Italy in 2005. I wrote about that a little bit on Instagram. So I'll give you a link and you can share that in the show notes, Melissa.
Okay.
But basically, this was like a trip of a lifetime that we saved money for, and then we all went. And the whole point of it was I wanted my kids to know that the world was available to them, that they could live anywhere, travel anywhere, see anything. And I feel like that actually happened, that got established. But at one point, we were spending a day or two in Florence, and we had an agenda. I wanted to see Sister Wendy Beckett's paintings that were in this Baronchi chapel that were like the start of the Renaissance, right? I had watched the videos with my kids. We knew what these paintings would be. They were murals on a wall inside of a big old church. So we went in, we saw them, we all were in awe that the thing we saw in video was now before us in person, right? That's the key to sightseeing. You want to see it first in a brochure or on a video or a postcard or a website so that when you see it in person, you're like, there it really is. Okay, so so we accomplished that. We did that there. We went to like the Science Museum and saw these inventions that were from the Renaissance. We went and saw the David. We went and saw the Uffizi. We went to the most famous gelato place in Florence called Vivalese. And right around the time that the day was kind of towards late afternoon, I had one item left on my list, and this was in 2005. I wanted to go to the Basilica of Santa Croce. And the whole reason is because I have read A Room with a View countless times, watched the movie more times than I care to admit, and yet I had never been in that basilica. And Forster has such vivid descriptions, some of them a little judgmental. And I was like, I got to see this for myself. So at the end of this long day, I said to John, I still want to see this church. He's like, Julie, the kids are melting down. We've really stressed them. We've taken them everywhere. And so I made this internal promise. The next time I'm in Italy alone, I am going to go to that church and stay as long as I want and find it, right?
You just gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, and here it is, 20 years in the making. I thought I'd be back sooner.
Wow.
But no, 20 years. And so I decided to take one day where I would just hop on a train and go to Florence. Now, before I tell you that part of the story, I have to give you the most hilarious sidebar that occurred yesterday when I got on the plane. And I am going to read you something, Melissa, because this is just so funny. As I'm getting on the plane, my aunt sends me a message, and it's in WhatsApp. And here's what it said. Timing is so important. The Via Reggio train station, okay, Via Reggio is the town I was in. I took a train from Via Reggio to Florence. The Via Reggio train station is closed yesterday, today, and who knows for how long. They found some unexploded bombs from World War II while digging to create a new underpass.
Julie!
Talk about history coming to life.
Wow. So you wouldn't even have been able to make your Florence jaunt.
No, or, what if the bomb had exploded? I mean, now you're starting to think, wow, how many other unexploded bombs are there from nearly a century ago? I mean, that's all by itself just kind of crazy. But I did make it. I was not incinerated by a bomb. And when I got to Florence, it was early in the morning, and I'm walking, in this like dappled sunlight through all these very narrow, shady streets, very familiar. I kept thinking of all the lines from A Room with a View. Oh, that's a Florentine smell. We will simply drift. I was just so caught up in the whole thing. So when I got to the Santa Croce church, I walked in, and the first thought I had was E.M. Forster, through the character of Lucy, had described it as how like a barn it was. And I couldn't unsee it. I walked in, I was like, he's not wrong. This is a big empty square. It doesn't have a lot of decoration. But I was listening to the audio tour, and as it turns out, every single wall had been a dramatic fresco in the past. And now it was just sort of stuccoed over in kind of a vanilla color because most of it had been lost, right? It was ruined. So what I chose to do first is I listened to the audio tour. I recommend that if you ever do go to a museum or a church, because they will tell you things that you would not understand otherwise. Like there was a tomb for Florence Nightingale. Who knew?
Oh, wow.
There was a tomb for Machiavelli. There was a tomb for Galileo. I'm like, how is this even real? Like, I'm in this place with all this history. They had these tombs in the floor, and some of them were just for common people who had enough money to pay to have one. But if you had a lot of money, they would put you in the floor and then do like a shape of your body in relief. So it was sort of curvy, like you could see the form had been carved into the marble. All of those are cordoned off so no one will trip. But here's what happened. I sat down in a pew. I opened up A Room with a View on my Kindle. I went and found the chapter on Santa Croce. And as I'm reading, I'd completely forgotten in that chapter that a little boy trips and falls.
That's right.
And that's what he tripped over. And I'm
Oh my
sitting there
gosh.
looking at the floor going, totally you would trip over this. No wonder there are barriers now. Like, it's that kind of thing that was just so freaking delightful to be there.
Oh my gosh. It's so just bringing it to life like that. And like those layers of history. Like, here's this book that was written in the early 1900s.
Exactly.
And about art that exists for centuries.
Oh, yeah. And in those early 1900s, anybody could go into the church. Now you have to pay. And in those early years, you know, Forster's writing about this collection of people who are in the church. There are some beggars. There are some people who are, you know, low income, right? Who are taking refuge inside the church. And then there are the tourists. And then there are the Italians. And then there's the guys leading the tours. They didn't have, you know, audio tours. They had Reverend Cuthbert Eager, you know, talking about in the, you know, who the workers were that built the cathedral in the full fervor of the Renaissance or whatever. I mean, it's so amazing. But there I am. I had to pay for a ticket to get in, but then consequently it was all tourists and we all had on our headphones. So it's very quiet. There isn't a lot of talking. It wasn't like this big active center as a result. It had kind of much more of a mix of reverence and tourism. And so, yes, I was thinking back to the people who came to church there in the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and then thinking about the tourists from a century ago, and then putting myself in this present moment. And, you know, Lissa, that's what we wanted to talk about today. One of the things that I think is so powerful about home education and why I continue to support it as a pedagogical choice is that you can create those layered connections for your child. Education, as I've often said, is not just reading. Reading is a part of it. But it's also this experience and encounter layer. And so here we had just kind of an amazing mixture, right? We had the experience of reading about Santa Croce through literature.
Right.
So I'm reading it and I'm learning about it. Then I'm in there with a tour guide through an audiobook or an audio format, and I'm experiencing the interpretation of what this place is through whoever this tour guide historian is that crafted the copy. And then I sat there and re-experienced the literature in the encounter of this building and this space. And there's a moment where Lucy is desperate. She is saying, where are the Giottos? Giotto is a Renaissance painter, well known for his ability to really evoke emotion. And he did these incredible murals on the walls. But unfortunately, because they were on the walls and the kind of paint that he used, they did not last as easily. They eroded over time. But there's a lot of controversy, and I heard this on the audio lecture, about whether or not restoration was the best strategy, because along came these people who came in and painted over to try and restore them. And in a room with a view, Reverend Cuthbert Eager, who is leading this tour, is like unhappily ruined by restoration. Like, he's literally commenting on that, and I had just heard it in the tour. So now I'm like, I want to find these paintings. Okay, I could not find them. I walked everywhere. I'm looking. And then I get to the part in the book where Lucy's like, where are those Giottos, right? And both George and his father guide her there. So I was like, they have got to be here. So I start looking in a more detailed way at the map because they're inside these two little, like, I don't know, places of worship, like these little alcoves. So it's not immediately apparent. I had to Google. So how about that? 2025, I'm Googling on my phone that has international minutes, right? To find out where these Giottos are. And that's what told me. Not the audio lecture, not the map they gave me, right? Not even the literature by E.M. Forster, but the virtue of the wonderful internet. And then I walked right over to them and I thought, isn't that funny? Even I had to get guidance to find these giottos. And then I'm standing there, I'm moved by them. They're actually quite gorgeous, but I'm asking myself, were they ruined? And there's that great line where E.M. Forster says, even Lucy was capable of experiencing the appropriate emotion over Giotto's tactile values. And I just found myself like asking myself, am I experiencing the appropriate emotion? It was such a meta experience. It was so funny.
It sounds like it. Well, I love all those layers. And then you get to come back and share that experience. And so now I'm experiencing the book, like thinking of the connection between you finding those
oh yeah, the tombs
and the little boy, like that's amazing, right? To contemplate, like those might have just escaped your notice if you hadn't read them in the book, or you might have seen them, but without the book, the connection wouldn't be as meaningful
at all. And ironically, like I said, every single one was bordered off so you couldn't trip over it. And so right. The idea that Forster, in his imagination, thought to include a child tripping on this, and then 100 years later, they're like, lawsuit. Right. It's so good.
This experience that you're mapping for us, I feel like it's been one of the most consistent and successful through lines of my whole homeschooling experience of knowing that we were going to go somewhere and just wanting to give them my kids some little hooks in their minds for knowledge to hang on, for experience to hang on, for sensory input to hang on.
Definitely.
And not overdoing it, not making it like we're going to study this place and then go visit, just in a casual way, like, oh, I know we're going to go to a zoo where there are koalas. So grabbing, Koala Lou, a picture book that I love, and just making it like that's in rotation the week before we go.
I love that you brought up the zoo, because while you were talking, I was like, we did this with the zoo. I was reading Life of Pi for myself, and there's a whole chapter on zoos in that book. And it's really a chapter that's discussing whether or not zoos are harmful to animals, which is a massive controversy. And even here in Cincinnati with a fabulous zoo, it's something they're constantly having to address in the public and in the imagination of how they, create the zoo enclosures, etc. So I took my kids there, got them La Rosa's pizza, because that's, something you can get at the zoo in Cincinnati. And we sat at this table and I read them the whole chapter. And then we took our walk and looked at the zoo and talked to each other about whether or not we thought these animals were happy. It was so much more meaningful. And I think what you just said and what I'm experiencing in this conversation, it's not just nonfiction. Right. It's not just giving more information. Like, okay, well, here are the dimensions of the Basilica Santa Croce. I mean, I could have read the Wikipedia page before I went in. That is not what had the impact on me. It was the fact that this place was embedded in literature, in a story I cared about, being seen through the eyes of characters I was getting to know. And then I came in, and as a writer especially, I'm like, okay, E.M. Forster, Emerson, I want to think about the writing craft. Like, what were you thinking when you were sitting here in this pew, imagining this was going to be a scene in your book?
Right.
The literary devices, the thought patterns, what you observed and decided to include. Like, did you overhear a tour guide and take that exact language and put it in the mouth of one of your characters? Did you also see a child stumble over this, like, that was so amazing. And Lissa, here's the thing. You literally write those kinds of books.
It's true.
Didn't something like that just happen for you? Tell us a little about what just happened in Colorado, because I just couldn't believe that we were having these parallel experiences.
Okay. I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, and summers during college, I had this amazing job as a tour guide on a wildlife refuge. It was 2,000 acres of short grass prairie, and there were sod houses. And like there were days where I dressed up in a bonnet and a prairie dress, and there was no running water in the sadis. So my job was to like carry water down to the sadis, and then school groups would come in, and I would give this tour, and we would churn butter and make Johnny cake, and so it was amazing job, loved it.
You really are Laura Ingalls Wilder. I mean, that's incredible. For those who don't know, she wrote a whole bunch of prequels to the Laura Ingalls Wilder series. Like, this is amazing. Keep going. Wow.
So, okay, fast forward a couple of decades, and I wrote a book called The Prairie Thief, and there's even a dart for it, which was a big surprise to me when that happened.
We will include a link. It's delightful. The book is amazing, and the dart is great.
And it's historical fiction, and the landscape is absolutely inspired by the Plains Conservation Center. And like everything I describe in that book, that was directly drawn from my experience of standing on the land. That's the like grant writing language you use. Stand on the land. Okay. So this book, my kids have read it. And my parents still live in Aurora. And I took my youngest son to visit them, and I got to stay a couple of nights and visit my parents. I hadn't been home in a really, really long time. Well, the Plains Conservation Center has now been taken over by the city of Aurora, and they're preserving it like forever.
Oh, how nice.
And you can just go. I mean, they have tours on special occasions, but the trails are open, and we went. My mom and dad took me out there, and I got to stand on the land again. And they've added things. I was really happy to see they've added an Indian village, because that is a piece of the history that was, sadly missing from my time when I worked there in the late 80s. And they've added, in addition to the sod houses, there's now a dugout. And I wrote about a dugout in The Prairie Thief. Like, it's a big part of the plot, is that dugout. And my son only knew dugouts from my book.
Wow.
This is wild to me.
Wow.
So when we got to like walk, and he was like, oh, whoa. Like, and his experience of that place was more informed by this book that I wrote than by like anything I've ever told him. To see that happen, I mean, I'm a little choked up about it, to have been able to experience that in that way. Most of the historical fiction I've written is in places that, well, all the Scotland books, like I've never been to Scotland.
Yeah.
I had a researcher because my baby was in the hospital.
Yeah.
When I wrote those books, I wrote a book set in the town I lived in Southern California, the nerviest girl in the world, right? Like, I lived there. I knew that landscape inside and out, but I didn't actually write the book until I moved away from that spot. And for one of my kids to have this experience of recognizing smells and sounds and sights that I had described in my book, and connect to them and have the place that was so meaningful to me be meaningful to him, not so much because of me, but because of the story.
Well, I mean, literally, your son was me in Santa Croce, right? So he's read this book, and he's lucky because he actually knows the author intimately. But he was having that experience. It's that I always like to say, if you really want your kids to know something, they need it twice.
Yes.
They need the introduction, which will bounce off them. It'll ricochet off them like a boomerang. And then they need a second. The second encounter is when it's like, wait, that's my old friend. That's the thing I heard about. That's the thing I thought I saw one other time. It creates this feeling of familiarity, which makes you more interested. And so here he's read this book. He has a mother who's from there, and now he's standing on the land, and he is seeing it through that original familiarity, but with deeper connection. That is learning. That's what we're looking for. If you're like me, you probably want to harness that back-to-school energy that you see in your kids when you kick off in the fall. That's when I would pick a big project to tackle with them, because they still had a lot of energy. We've got classes like world building, which really appeals to gamers, writing the short story, essay prep, dynamic thinking, middle school writing projects, Brave Writer 101, our main course when you're just getting started with us, Story Switcheroo for your little kids, and even something like script writing for those kids who want to write the next best Netflix show. Check us out. I think you'll find that these classes pay dividends all year. Once your kids experience being read and valued for their self-expression, they'll want to see if they can have that effect on you. We see ourselves as a great antidote to the rise of ChatGPT. Check the show notes for a link, and we hope to see you in an online class with Brave Writer.
And the thing is, it can work in both directions.
Yes.
I've done it if we visited a place and then we would find books about it. Or watch a video just to know a little bit more, the sort of the information you were getting from your audio tour.
Yes.
To fill in some of those knowledge gaps or to deepen our knowledge after visiting.
Totally.
Has been incredible, right? That's a wonderful experience. Or if we're going to visit a state or a city or just something even tiny like a museum, and for them to have familiarity with a couple of pieces of art that they're going to stumble upon in this museum, that makes it more meaningful to them. I know your experience with the art that you saw, part of it is because of those Sister Wendy videos that you watched so long ago.
1,000%. And in fact, that's why I did it for myself, but my kids were in on it. So there we were, looking in 2005 at Botticelli's Venus in the clamshell there in the Uffizi Museum. Most of the artwork was uninteresting to my kids. But then suddenly we're looking at this one that Sister Wendy had so thoroughly described. And so we suddenly felt connected, right? Everybody stopped. We're like, oh my gosh, we're standing in front of this thing. That's the real thing.
Right.
That's a really powerful experience. And I like what you said about how it can go in either order. That's really true too. I remember last summer, my boyfriend was with us on that trip for the wedding, and he had never been to Italy. So we went to Pisa because Pisa was only 30 minutes from where I was staying. And if you talk to most people who travel to Italy, they often say, oh, don't even bother with Pisa. It's not that great. Don't worry about it. But that is exactly not the experience I had. And it was not the experience of my boyfriend. I had seen Pisa before. I've walked up the tower. It's leaning. You're literally walking up a leaning tower. You can feel when you're on the side that's on the top end, and you can feel when you're swooping down on the side that would fall. You can feel that. And when we got done, he was like, that was the coolest thing. I loved that. When was this built again? Yes, exactly. Because the second that you have that experience of something, you want to understand it better. So we went and started opening our phones because that's how we learn everything today, and found out when it was built and why it was leaning and how they've had to work to keep it from falling over. They have this huge erected like metal lever that keeps it from falling all the way over because, hello, it's the primary source of revenue for that whole town, right? As people coming to see this leaning tower. I think that is so amazing. You can think that you know something, you feel like you've seen it on TV or postcards or on a website, and then when you're there in person, you're like, oh my gosh, it's actually leaning. I'm in the leaning tower. My body is leaning. That is just so different than hearing about it.
What I think is that recognition and knowing something about something is one of the most satisfying experiences that a person can have.
Agreed.
It feels so good to know about something. Everybody loves an inside joke. We've seen it in our kids how many times when they get to tell us all about a thing that they have more expertise in than we do, dinosaurs or whatever their key interest may be. Is so gratifying and exciting. It just feels very fulfilling to people to share what they know. And so having that, like seeding what they might encounter, seeding it with a little bit of knowledge or something that just creates that spark of recognition, I think is such a gift that we can give our kids and ourselves.
1,000%. In fact, at the end of my trip, I went to Copenhagen in Denmark. because it's a city I've never been to. And I decided to challenge myself to go somewhere I've never been. And I did not have anyone there. So this is unusual for me. I typically travel places where I know someone. So I was on my own, staying in a hotel by myself. I personally do not enjoy travel research. Some people, that is half the high. Just preparing, imagining, figuring out the best restaurants, which sites should you see. I kind of go in with a blank. I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't make me look on a website. So, so when I arrived, I just let myself, do the Miss Lavish thing. I was drifting. I just let myself walk and notice and kind of pay attention to the smells, whatever. At one point, I was sharing on social media that I was in Copenhagen, and someone said, have you been to the Little Mermaid yet? Well, the Little Mermaid is this statue that is sitting on a rock that's in the canal. And, I was like, oh, I didn't know about her. I maybe should find out what the main sites are in Denmark here in Copenhagen. I don't want to miss them. And so then at that point, I went and I got on a boat tour. And before we got on, I'm like, does the boat tour go to the Little Mermaid? He's like, yes. And it gave me kind of like the lay of the land. Or the lay of the water, to be honest. It was fabulous. But that was the way that I started to develop the relationship with the town. And sometimes I think it's really worthwhile if you're a tourist to just be a tourist so that you can experience like what you're supposed to experience, because there's a reason that everybody wanted to go see that statue. I will tell one funny little story. They had these old World War II ships still in the water, like massive. And they had these big cranes that could move them out of the way or put them up on dry dock if they needed to. And so one year when one of those little harbor areas cleared out of boats, they decided to turn the crane into a bungee jumping attraction.
Oh.
So a person could like go to the top of the crane and bungee jump off of it. And so the marketing strategy was it costs X amount of Danish kroner to do it. But if you're willing to jump naked, it's free. And he said it almost bankrupted them because the Danes love being naked. They have zero shame.
That's hilarious.
So everyone did it. And he said that right after we had just had our boat go by a guy who was 6 feet away from our boat, 75 years old, fully naked, in the water, swimming, in the channel.
That is wild. Oh, speaking of fully naked, I wanted to issue a slight disclaimer that our beloved A Room with a View movie
Yes.
that we both love, like you and I both love the Merchant Ivory one from the 90s, right?
Yes.
There is one scene where there is some male frontal nudity.
Yes.
So if anybody's listening to this and decides to watch it with your kids, just be aware.
Yes.
It's when they go to the pond.
Yes, that's the Sacred Lake, I think she calls
the Sacred Lake.
And to be fair, the nudity is very playful. It's the way kids are. They're just running.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They're running around
and
the
they're
pond.
playing in the water. So it's not a sexual scene, just to be
No,
clear.
not at all. It's quite charming, actually. It's really funny.
My kids loved it. Yeah, they thought it was hilarious. It's very funny.
I just wouldn't want it to catch parents off guard if they're tuning in. There's a more recent version of A Room with a View on film.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Me either. So let's not tell them about it.
No. Our book club had a big debate about it.
They did. But what I was going to add is, so after I had been in Copenhagen, did all the things, took the walk, saw the windmill, went to Tivoli Gardens, did all the things. It was time to fly home, and I got on my flight, and sitting next to me is a man my age, and he was very friendly. He's from Minneapolis. I'm from Cincinnati. We kind of talked a minute. And so then I said, were you on business? And he said, yes. I said, oh, what's your business? Fully expecting him to be like, I work for Lego. I don't know. And he said, I'm a university professor at the University of Minnesota. I was like, oh my gosh, tell me the field. He said, I am in forest economics.
Say more.
And I was like, okay, now I'm interested. Can we talk for 6 hours, please? Can you entertain me for the rest of my flight? And sure enough, he did for quite a while. By the end, I was like, oh, apparently I need to book my next trip to Sweden and go to the forests, because apparently they're the best forests on the planet. And he just told me so many magical things. But then he opened up, like, if you've been on a plane, there's like a flight tracker where you can see the plane going from where you take off to where you land, and it shows what countries you're flying over. He just starts narrating about Iceland, about Greenland, about Canada.
This is my dream come true.
Oh, that's how I felt. Then he like opens up the Canadian one, like you can make it bigger. And it's in the middle of nowhere. And he points to this barely visible thread of a river. And he's like, so I've canoed on that with a friend, and we camped the whole way and hunted elk. And he's like, and when you get to the end of it, you go about 100 miles in this direction. I'm like, 100 miles? He's like, there is a group of people there who are subsistence people. They literally don't have like a grocery store. They have nothing. And he said it's like 4 people. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And anyway, he started telling me about all these ways that people live in the world, so different from us who live in forests, and telling me about just the whole ecology of it all. And I realized that's the other reason to travel, because other people's expertise will come across your life that you would never in a million years have any reason to meet or know. And then you get to be like the beneficiary, the recipient of all this totally interesting information. Like, I came home, he gave me a book recommendation. Melissa, the book he was reading on the plane. Okay, I hope he's never going to listen to this. He'll be like, Julie, I didn't expect you to talk about me on your podcast. But because he also like took down my name, took a picture of my books. He's like, I want your critical thinking book. So that was really fun. But here's what's so funny. I'm sitting next to him. He's holding this very old looking book. It's obviously been published in the last 50 years, his copy, but it was written in the 1920s. It is a collection of short stories about duck hunting in the wilderness.
Wait, what's it called?
Do you know this book?
I don't know if it's the same book, and I can't remember the name of this book that I just came across.
Oh, I'm going to tell you, because you just got me excited. The name of the book is Stories of the Old Duck Hunters and Other Drivel by Gordon McQuarrie.
Yes!
No.
In my swimming pigs research.
No.
Yes!
Melissa, there it is.
You are kidding me.
I am not kidding you.
Come on.
Come on. Come on. This is the best podcast episode ever. Okay, so here's the thing. He told me that he used to read these stories to his wife. They've been married 40 years when they were dating, because he found them so charming. He brought it on this trip. Think about this. This man has had this book for more than 40 years, and he brought it on this trip to read because it's so delightful and pleasurable to him. He's like, Julie, is the best writing. So when he went to the bathroom, I quickly picked it up and I started reading, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to buy this book. It is so charming. I want to read it to my grandkids.
Charming is exactly the word.
Yes. And I want to read it to Liam. I was like, I've got to get Liam back. He's in his 30s. He is going to love this book. It's like the best stories about wilderness life. Okay, we will put a link in the show notes. Melissa, tell me why you ran across it. This is blowing my mind. You and I have the most overlapping lives. It's crazy.
I can't believe this has happened.
Unplanned.
I came across it when I was searching for, okay, so the book that I'm writing is set in Texas in summer of 1980, and it's in San Marcos, Texas. And so one of the things that I do is I have to really steep myself in, I made a visit, but that only takes me so far. I have to research all of the flora and fauna and really be able to talk about it. And this book came up when I was searching for resources, and I wasn't even sure. I mean, my book's not about ducks or duck hunting, but I was like, I'll learn some things for sure. So I got it, and it's so charming. It's so delightful. I'm so happy that I got this book.
Oh my gosh, it makes me want to send an email to this professor. He is going to die. That's so funny.
It's just the wildest coincidence. It's so old.
It's so old. But here's the thing that I noticed immediately. It's the cadence, right? And this is why, like, some people get very hooked on their book recommendations from long ago, whether it's classical ed or Charlotte Mason, because there is a way of expressing themselves from this other era that has, like, the effect of kicking you out of social media speak. Right?
Right.
Like, we're all in this style of communication that is very our generation, which is fine. That's normal. But then when you read something that's from another era, it lands. It lands in this like different way. And so the little bit I read, I was like, oh, he's delightful. This guy is a storyteller. Yes. Yeah, I'm excited.
It's a living book, right? Like
Totally.
that term that we got from Charlotte Mason, describing a book written by somebody who is just on fire with love for their subject.
Oh my gosh. It's so great.
I'm going to be just like floating for the rest of the day as this sinks in that this happened. I can't believe it happened.
Well, I can't believe you're like, wait a minute, I might know that book.
I'm sorry. Are you referring to?
I mean, that's mind-blowing to me. There was a book that my mother-in-law bought at a garage sale for Liam when he was a kid, and it was called Ruggy, and it was about this deer named Ruggy, and we read that book over and over and over. I read it to him. John read it to him. It's a novel-length book, but it's this like wilderness-style storytelling, and for some kids, by the way, that is like the favorite way to do literature. Like, they want to inhabit the world of animals. And so, I mean, I was totally going to order this book and read it. So now we'll both read it and we can talk about it. Maybe we'll do an episode on Gordon McQuarrie's stories of the old duck hunters and other drivel. Other drivel.
The humility of old Gordon.
I love you, Gordon. You're the best.
Oh, what would Gordon say if he knew that there's, like, in 2025, he's got these two brand new fangirls?
100 years later? Come on. I would die if a book of mine lasted 100 years and had fans.
Oh, I know. That's
right?
the dream.
Isn't that the dream? Oh, my gosh.
Okay, so Julie, when you're talking about, look at what happened because you had a conversation with your seatmate, you reminded me of this video that I happened to catch this weekend. It was just a little snippet. I immediately sent it to Scott. This woman was, and I don't even know the context of the whole interview. This is just a snippet. This woman was asked, what one piece of advice would you give to Gen Z kids right now?
Oh, love
and it surprised me. And it was such a great point. She said, learn to talk to strangers.
Love it.
She said, so much of what is meaningful in life comes from accidental chance encounters.
Totally.
And as we have become more accustomed to just like filling spaces, waiting in line or on a plane, especially with on our phones, right? But also there's just, I think, a post-COVID thing where a lot of younger people are not that comfortable making small talk, being in conversation, especially with older people, but even their peers.
That's right.
You know, in strange, uncertain circumstances, like when you're on a plane next to someone. When I flew home on Saturday from Denver, at the Denver airport, like, woo, that airport, DIA is like a lot.
Yes.
You ride a train to your terminal. And there was a guy right in front of me at security who was maybe early 20s. And he was so just discombobulated by the whole thing. His Uber driver had dropped him at arrivals instead of departures. So he was from the get-go. And then like he got flagged during security for something, you know, and he was just so thrown. I just commented to him about like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened at security. And I became his airport mom, helping him like navigate to the terminal and then like find his gate and stuff. He was just really thrown. And he was so clearly like shy and a little this was new territory for him. I could tell, like talking to this stranger. And when we parted at our gates, he suddenly turned back and he said, "Oh, I'm Charlie." And he stuck out his hand to shake my hand. And it was like, I could just hear his like mom, like, "Always introduce yourself. Always see me."
But I mean, that is such a beautiful example. I feel like when we have those connections, we're much more likely to start to see the other as a person of worth and value as well.
Right.
Whenever we keep people in the two-dimensional virtual version of them, they become the avatar. They just become a caricature of who they actually are. And I think for each one of us, as we're, sort of wrapping up today's episode, what I think the takeaway is, take risks to be out of your comfort zone and to learn from other people. For me, being in Italy was so necessary, so needed. I learned, for instance, this will just be my last little interesting tidbit. I learned that in Italy, the goal of employment is to earn a permanent contract. And I was like, what does permanent mean? I'm like, how permanent is that contract? And they're like, oh, it's permanent. You can't be fired.
Whoa.
So I was like, you mean like tenure for teachers? And my aunt was like, yes, exactly. That's exactly it. It's almost impossible to be fired. So you're working really hard to be valuable. And then when you get this permanent contract, now you won't be fired and you can apply to buy a house. So there's this incentive mixed in. And at first I was like, I'm a business owner. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I said to my cousin who just got his permanent contract, I said, well, what if people don't want to work? He goes, Julie, they're at work. Of course they want to work. Like, what a strange thing to assume that people, given the chance, would just come to a place of work and not work. And I was like, okay, fair point. And it's just one of those things where you don't even know how much the way you think is shaped by all the messages that you keep being told in your own culture.
Yes.
Until you go somewhere where the assumptions are completely different. And somehow they're carrying on with these lives of meaning and satisfaction. It's amazing. So worth it.
Yes. So those experiences in these spaces where we're outside our comfort zone, that creates connections, and connections are what create love.
Love and education.
That's right.
I mean, absolutely. Gosh, that was a fun episode. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and welcoming me back. And Melissa, thank you for everything you do for the podcast, especially when I'm not around. This was really fun.
Well, we missed you.
Thank you. Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going, think well. We're rooting for you.